Jim Gibbons, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Enjoy your content, and I'm really excited to be a part of your show here today.
Absolutely. Now, as much as I'm excited about the season coming up and hearing you on Big Ten and all the good duels, we got some other big announcements coming. You're releasing, you and your partners, a documentary series called The Duel. It's going to be going live in select theaters across Iowa here, and then on all the major streaming apps in November. And this duel chronicles one of the most epic duel meets between Iowa and Iowa State of all time. Of course, back then they wrestled twice a year, so it was the second duel meet in '86.
Yeah.
You were the youngest head coach in college wrestling at that time. Dan Gable was coming off of it would have been 8 straight, going for his 9th. So let's just start though with I want to go back in time a little bit because I know the Gibbons name, but for some folks who are listening where maybe they didn't grow up wrestling and their kid just got into wrestling and they found this podcast, tell me about the Gibbons family coming up in wrestling in Western Iowa, because it's legendary.
Well, we grew up in Ames, right, where Iowa State University's at, and my uncles actually were wrestlers at Iowa State, and they came from Northeast Iowa with Cresco, which is where our coach, longtime coach Harold Nichols is from. It's actually where Gary Kurtelmeyer is from as well, who national champion coach who hired Dan Gable away, and where Gable's his assistant coach for a couple of years. So we were kind of, and my dad's from Waterloo, which is another hotbed for wrestling. And so we were small, and when we were growing up in Ames, and at that point in time, in the '60s, that was a great time for wrestling at Iowa State. And 1965, I was like 6 years old, maybe 5 years old. We moved to Ames, and then a year later, we hosted the national wrestling tournament there. I remember being there in our 6,000 person auditorium, and as a little kid, and we were just tied to the sport in a lot of ways, and we were blessed with the fact that we didn't mature very quickly. we were little guys. I think all of us, but my youngest brother, wrestled at 98 pounds, and which was the lightest weight back then, and we kind of matured into it. The weight class. It's hard to believe I was a 98 pounder looking at me today, but that's the way it was. But we grew up, and I was the oldest of 4 boys, and we had those genetics on my mom's side. My uncles were a state champion wrestlers, and my dad was an attorney at the time, and worked his way through law school when we were all little kids, and we lived in married student housing in those little Quonset huts there that where Hawkeye Carver Arena is. And, I grew up being an Iowa fan. I remember going down as a kindergartner holding the football, and I got to do it because I wouldn't move my finger, and the rest of the kids would shag the balls, and then I would catch the snap and hold the ball here for a kicker by the name of Donnie Anderson, and he used to give me tickets, and we moved to Ames when like I said, I was in 2nd grade, and just kind of hit the hot times of Iowa State wrestling. And we remember going to the Armory and watching Dan Gable and all of his teammates. I mean, it was a lot of winning going on right now. They captivated the community, captivated the state. The '65 team won the national title. Was the first team to take that away from one of the Oklahoma schools that owned it for about 15 years, and which was a tremendous rivalry. But then, when Gable showed up and he was there, I mean, it was just dynamic. And we go into some of that history of Dan's history at Iowa State in this docuseries that we're doing. But our background is we grew up in Ames. We all became state champions and did a lot of
brothers,
work.
State champs. That's incredible.
Yeah. We still have the record, I think, for the most state titles as brothers. We have 10 state titles, and so I won 3. My brother Tim won 1 as a sophomore, and he's having a hard time making weight and all that stuff. Just wasn't any fun for him. But he did stop kind of wrestling in his junior year, and then Joe won 4, and then Jeff won 2, and we had a record of 40-1 in the state tournament. So it was pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you're a Cyclone fan in Ames, and obviously you mentioned you get there, Dan Gable wrestles Owings in 1970 at Northwestern. So you're there for all of that. And that is just mania.
Well, yeah, I wasn't that old then, obviously, but my parents, my dads and my uncles went to McGaw Hall and watched it in Chicago at Northwestern, and so I remember my uncle Omer, all right, who was a state champion as well, and wrestled for Iowa State. He took a color picture of the team photo, right, of that. I just recently found it, and Omer passed away a few years ago, and we were going through some of his stuff, and he had a color photo of that championship team, in 1970, and you can see, Dan being kind of consoled by his teammates, but we have a color shot of the big, the red
Wow.
robes and all that stuff, so yeah, we were just immersed in the history of wrestling at that time, and I remember going up as little kids and watching Gable and Ben Peterson and his brother John. We went to camps there. Dave Martin, who's went on to coach at Oklahoma State, became the assistant athletic director at Oklahoma State for years. Well, actually, was a conference commissioner for a short period of time. He put the mats in. Tom Peckham, who was probably one of the most influential figures in Iowa wrestling history, when you really go back and look at it, with that '65 championship team, made the Olympics in '68. Was a huge influence on. It was Dan Gable's hero, as he admittedly says, that and Bob Buzzard,
Yeah.
right, from Waterloo, and Omer and Joe were teammates of Tom Peckham's in Cresco, so we are all intertwined into the sport here, and just always had dreams of wrestling at a big time school, and winning a national title when we were kids.
And so you said you were a 3-time state champ. When it came to deciding colleges, did you have any doubt of Iowa State, or what was that like?
Well, I knew a lot of the guys on the Iowa State team, and I got recruited by Oklahoma State. I got by Tommy Chesbro. I got recruited by then Bill Nelson, who was an Iowan. Got recruited by Minnesota at the time, which wasn't the program that became under Jay. It was just I knew the guys. We'd go up there all the time and roll around and work out or watch practice on a Sunday. Bunch of great guys. They just won the national title in 1977. That was my senior year. They called me up, and it was interesting. I stopped going up there for a while because it was my senior year. I wasn't making it up there, and I made it up there like a week before a state tournament. And Coach Nick comes up to me and says, he didn't really say a whole heck of a lot. He goes, "I just want you to know, win or lose, we're going to offer you a scholarship, and we'd like to come to Iowa State." Well, I just said, "Okay, all right, I'm coming." and so we lived like 4 blocks at the time away from the training facility at Byard Hall, and then he called me up like right before like 2 weeks before the signing date. And he says, "Would you like to come take a visit?" No, I want to do that, right? There might have been a couple high school get-togethers at that time I didn't want to miss or whatever, but
Right.
The time frame was, then he called up the night before signing date. He showed up at my house at 8:00. I had to have been the easiest guy ever to recruit to Iowa State. So
Right.
that. My brother Joe, after he won 4 titles, and I was a national champion that year, I told him, I says, "You got to make this decision on your own." And he actually looked at University of Iowa really hard. I mean, Jay recruited him there. Brandy Lewis was over there. He had obviously had a good relationship with us and our family, and they worked really hard to get him. And Gable just was in disbelief that he'd ever consider coming to Iowa. I think he was kind of a little bit. You're not going to Iowa. You're not going to Iowa. So it kind of made Joe mad because he was actually considering going there.
You want to be recruited a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But he ended up coming to Iowa State. It was a great decision for him. So, and then my brother Jeff, he didn't really have much choice, right? So, I was coaching by then. I was the recruiting coordinator. If he didn't come, it was going to make me look pretty bad.
Well, that's like the build up to this dual meet, and we're going to get there. But it's like look at all the groundwork, right? You grew up around the Iowa State program. You would go on to have a lot of success in high school. At college, you're at Iowa State. You become an NCAA champ, but knowing that this is really during the heyday of Gable, did you guys win many of those dual meets, or how'd you guys do against a team?
Well, we won a really dynamic dual meet in 1981, all right, where Dave Ozenbaugh, the most unlikely of heroes, ends up he's 350-pound man, and you know, he wasn't known for he was kind of like a Gumby, you know. He was really flexible and all that stuff, really difficult to pin. And Lou Bannock goes out there, they need a pin to win, and he goes out there and tuckers himself out, and somehow Ozenbaugh gets on top of him and all that weight and all that stuff, and he pins him, and we win the dual meet. So it's really probably one of the loudest times you ever heard Hilton Coliseum. So I was in that meet, and that's when I wrestled Randy Lewis, and he got hurt. And so that was a meet. But Iowa was, so you got to remember this time frame. Iowa State won it in 77. Iowa State loses in by a half a point to Iowa in 1978, and that starts the streak. Okay.
Got it.
And Iowa started to pull away as a program from the crowd, and then it's just like it didn't make any difference what happened. Like in I think it was 84, 85, where Tommy Chesbro had that great team, and they finished.
That was 84.
Yeah, 84, and they had that great team, and well.
They destroyed Iowa in the duel, so they
they beat Iowa in the duel, and
Gable's Jay was the coach.
Gable was the Olympic coach. He turned it over to Jay, and then he brought it all back, and you know, it's like Dad came home. So I would say that, and they routed it, and then they let go of Tommy at that point in time, and he was coach of the year and beat Iowa. The only thing he did, he finished second in the country, and you know, that's pressure.
That's a crazy thing, because then Joe C comes in, and I mean, like that is a very. John Smith was a freshman, and in that dual meet, he was losing to Trezino with like 10 seconds left, and he slide bys him.
Like 3 seconds left, Ryan. It wasn't even. It was
really
just like hit that beautiful snap down and Chuck and goes by. But that was the first big match that John won in Gallagher Iba, and I think it was Gallagher back then. I don't think they had. But anyway, so long story short, so we were just immersed in all that. So we used to go to the Big 8 wrestling tournament back then, and it was Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and you know, I just saw a lot of things that are going to help me during my career. But I personally did not get off to a fast start. I mean, I had a staph infection once between my senior year and I wasn't able to wrestle in junior nationals that year. I won the Eastern Nationals, but I kind of went off the radar. And I came back, and I was just a shell of myself. I'd lost I had a really bad staph infection in my hip. And you see some of these athletes, you know, guys like Mark Schwab had kind of the same thing with his knee operation. I don't know how it got there. I was up there training at Jeff Kerber's house when Jeff Kerber was, and Jeff Kerber's mom, Jenny, brought me back to Ames, and I had like 106-degree temperature and all that stuff. It was like close to life threatening. And I didn't really tell anybody about it. And then I came back, and they looked at me. I was just like a shell of myself, right? So in that point in time, you couldn't redshirt as a freshman. So I went out there and actually ended up making it down with the weight allowances down to 118, wrestled a couple matches there. And then I flew the coop.
How hard was that pull?
It was impossible, but I couldn't maintain it. But I started from a really kind of sick position. So I was just really. So I had a bad experience my first year, didn't get off to a flying start. I watched guys like Randy Lewis finish second in the country to my teammate at 26. I probably should have been a 26, 34 pounder at that time. I shouldn't have, somebody should have pulled me off of that, but we had lost so many 18 pounders that during that course that year. And obviously we were competing for national title. And even that year in 78, we had a lot of guys that got hurt leaving Iowa State. Yeah, that made a difference, and the spread between Iowa State back then was just very small, and they won by a half point, which started their streak. But all those guys always made an impression on me about, even after they won, even guys like Mike Land that won a national title said, you're just gonna love being, if you guys win a team title, you guys are just gonna love it. It's just the best feeling in the world. And I always kept that in my mind. And that's what drove me as a young coach, and I wanted to have that experience that a lot of my mentors had, being a team champion, so we were kind of driven, and that became the drive of my coaching career, is to win a team title and have that experience, and they were right when it eventually happened. They were absolutely right. Yeah,
1987, and that's such a crazy thing, because again, for folks who maybe don't know, like that no team had ever won 10 in a row, right? UCLA,
in any sport. Yeah.
any sport, UCLA,
Right.
Yale golf, like back in the 30s, they had won 9, and Gable had won 9 in 86, and then 87. You guys win it, which I know is outside the scope of the documentary a little bit, but tell
Yeah.
me about, so you're a national champ at Iowa State. Is that your junior year or senior year?
My junior year, I was a national champ. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then your senior year, you All-American again, graduate, and then did you coach right away, or talk to us about that progression into coaching?
Well, I didn't envision myself as being a coach because, you know, we had a pretty solid coaching staff. And, you know, you've done some work with Chris Campbell. Chris Campbell was a huge mentor of mine, right? And
Really?
when he came when he came to Iowa State in 80, and Willie Gadsden, Ivan's dad, you know, encouraged him to come over from Iowa. All right. Willie moved up to like 198 pounds for freestyle, and Chris came in. And Chris just, you know, he put us in a training program that year, and our coach relinquish control of everything, of what the way they were doing it forever, and turn it over to Chris, and we made huge strides in a short period of time. And I remember during that time frame when Chris was coaching, he came up to me and he said, after the Midlands, and I got beat, and I was in the consolations, and I did some good things, and I was doing what he asked me to do from the corner, you know. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, Chris, oh, you know, Chris, he's got really soft voice, and he goes, you know, I think you have what it takes to be a national champion, right? You know, and that was my goal. And he's kind of like the first guy that kind of came up and said that to me. And after that, anything he told me, I would run through the wall for him, you know.
Wow.
And so his which is beautiful thing about this is, I found out this much later. He at the end of the year, we would do a lot of running and training and sprinting and all that. And I know, you know, he got a lot of that from Gable because he obviously was at Iowa and all that. But then I'm reading Ben Peterson's book, and I can't recommend Ben Peterson's book enough, right? The way it touched me, because I knew all these people he was talking about. But there's a part in there in Ben's book where he's training up in Waterloo with Gable before the 72 Olympics. Now think about this for a second. Ben Peterson, his senior year, got like second place in the Class B championships in Wisconsin. And 5 years later, he's an Olympic champion.
Crazy.
Right? Crazy. But again, I watched as a little kid him be destroyed, not destroyed, but he was wrestling Gable, and Gable's running through these guys like you can't believe it. You know, you don't think that they're going to be all that successful. Well, they had worked their way. The volume of work that those men put in to win those medals was phenomenal. All right. So I watched all that hard work. So anyway, Ben is telling the story in his book about being up and training at Gable's place, which is right next to West Waterloo High School. And, you know, like the football field is not far away. And Ben tells the story about he can hear some loud screaming and yelling in the back of I don't know if it's screaming and yelling, but he heard loud voices in the backyard. And it was Matt Gable, and
that's his dad, right?
That's his dad. All right. Telling, you know, because those guys would get up in the morning and they'd train, and they'd go in the afternoon, they'd go over to West Waterloo and go ahead and wrestle. You know, so they were drilling and wrestling about every day. Okay. So here's this argument in the backyard, and Mac would get up every day at 6 o'clock in the morning, go to work, and these guys were still, you know, milling around. I'm sure they were doing something that was, you know, good for them. So anyway, he gets on Gable, and so during that loud talking, Ben's thinking, well, we're going to get kicked out of here, reading them out of house and home. We turned their shower into a sauna, and the drywall's hanging off of the tub and all that. We're just turning this place into a mess. And so he said, well, do we need to pack up and leave? And Gable says, no. It's just, he just wants to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can. So Gable got up in the morning at the same time as Mac, and got the Peterson boys up, and they go for a run, and they would do sprints.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was the genesis of what we were doing back through Chris Campbell. And I had its roots all the way back to
wow
to Matt Gable. All right. And so I always felt that I was really blessed to be really connected to number one, the program, but the tradition at Iowa State when it was happening there, and we just had a lot. We tried to portray a lot of confidence to our guys that if you do the work here at this place, you're going to have a great chance of winning a national title. And I was blessed with great teammates. Had a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun, wrestling there. Had no vision of being a coach at all, because I just felt that we had I was confident in the people that coached me, and then things that happened and people left, and then pretty soon after I graduated my senior year, I was in the room helping. I took the fall semester off. I ended up graduating my last semester, and I was going to tell Nick thank you because he helped pay for me getting that last semester. And I said, I want to thank you and everything. And I'm going on. I was going to go actually to New Mexico and go to grad school there and coach with Bill Dotson at New Mexico. And he goes, I want you to come back next week. I want to make you our recruiting coordinator. I go, really? Because you want me to coach, right? Because I wanted to, if I was going to be there, I wanted to coach. I didn't want to necessarily be the office guy.
Right.
But I ended up being both and ended up taking over the training program. Chris left that next year. And heck, I went to Chris because I was alarmed because I had my younger brother in the program. I said to Joe, I said, well, who's going to take over the training program? And he goes, well, you're going to do it. I go, what? Right. I had no concept of that I was going to be an assistant coach. And the great thing about my progression is that by being a recruiting coordinator, I got in the rooms. I got in the I proved that we could do that. I could do that, in that role. And I think that helped me a lot when it came time to deciding whether they were going to hire a 25-year-old guy to be the head coach, so I had that recruiting experience.
And you can't say enough of like how big of a figure Harold Nichols was in this time. I mean, he was an innovator. He had a business, kind of like Cliff Keen was for Michigan. He was that for Iowa State, and you're stepping into his shoes, right? So you're the assistant.
Cliff Keen was my coach's coach.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Nick was a national champion in the late 40s for Cliff Keen. So he had that model.
That's the connection. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the connection. This is all, we're all kind of incestuous. Yeah.
Now, so you're an assistant, and then how, talk to us about like the first time that you got called in by the administration. They said we're thinking about making you the head coach. Well,
that's kind of what happened. I got a call from the assistant athletic director, and he said that the head athletic director would like you to apply for the job. And I wasn't really, I thought that I was making an impression, but I never really thought that I would be the guy until the opportunity came up to interview for it. And I took it very seriously. I put a plan together and, knew these people that were in the hiring process. And I'm up at 6 o'clock in the morning doing the morning workouts. I'm reporting to my head coach at 9 o'clock in the morning, 8:30, 9 o'clock when he gets in the office. 10:30, I'm going to go grab some breakfast, and I'm coming back and I do my recruiting stuff and then practice, which by that time I was helping, I'm doing most of the practice running because he'd give everything that Chris Campbell was doing, I ended up doing. And then at night I'd go out and visit, make visits or get to see other, go see some high school do meet somewhere. But I was burning it on both ends. And so that you don't get those jobs unless you're putting a heck of a lot of time in. I was single, I was young, and I was really getting into it. I enjoyed the travel. I had the energy for it. And I wasn't training. I wasn't cutting weight.
Right. So you're feeling good.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. So, no, I had that, just that coaching experience. And the other thing too, I would go in there and I would talk to Nick. When you wrestled for him, again, 6 national titles, I think 11 times they finished second. We had a period of time that we were in the top 4, for 35 years or something like that, or 30. I think coached for like 31. But I just enjoyed visiting with him on a one-on-one level, and whether we were talking about business things or artwork, or he was really eclectic. He had, he collected pottery. He was just an interesting man. And the one thing I always say about Coach Nichols is that and Dan says that kind of the same thing about it too. We were kind of blessed to be around him because there were just so many things that he just didn't sweat. He just didn't really. It was the experience of an older coach that really helped out. And there's some things that maybe not every detail got but the big things were really important about having steel, sharpening steel with postgraduates around, having good people, have a lot of competition for weight classes there. But 30 people could walk into and look at something, and yeah, they'd be right. They'd all come to an agreement. But Nick would always be the guy that saw something else, and whether that be in people. And one of the things that I learned from him, and I kept in my coaching, that I just noticed that I just appreciated, because the way I was handled, just never gave up on you, and never gave up on you. It's not like you're not going to give somebody a spot, but you never felt like you were given up on, and you might ignore it, but he ignored the best guys. Right? He just didn't. Nate tells a story about coming in there. I think it's his freshman or sophomore year, maybe it's his junior year. One of his upperclassmen years, going against Kenny, because I can't feel my arm or whatever. He had some sort of numbness going on, and doesn't say anything, doesn't react to it at all. He's got these reading glasses on like this. All my old teammates will be able to go ahead and laugh at that. Got the reading glasses on, looks over his glasses, and he says, after about what felt like 10 minutes for Nate, he says, "You'll be all right." That's it.
Man,
have Nate tell you the story sometime, and you know what? Nate put it to prayer, and he was all right.
Well, that story reminds me of, like, in the 80s, man, the Big 12, the Big 8, you had Kenny Monday, you had Nate Carr, you had the Schultz brothers. It's like, man, those were some tournaments.
Yeah. And I had teammates like, Perry Hummel was my roommate. One of my best experiences and choices in life was to go ahead and decide to make Perry Hummel my roommate. Perry Hummel got second his freshman year.
Wow.
And as a redshirt freshman, and he ended up he was a guy that worked hard, and I decided to work with the guy who's working hard, and we both worked hard together, and we made huge improvements. And back then, a lot of times you had to work out 3 times a day just to keep your weight down and all that stuff. You'd have a morning workout with Chris, and then you'd have a afternoon workout, and then by about 8:30, 9 o'clock, if you ate a pretty good meal, you wanted to get in and get another workout in. So you'd run a couple miles and go do something to dehydrate and all that stuff, and then go back and go stop by the Casey's or the Quick Trip afterwards, and gulp down 2 32-ounce glasses of whatever it was, and then you'd go to sleep at about 11 o'clock, and at 6 o'clock you'd do it all over again. So that was like, you didn't do that all the time, but usually in the last couple months of the season. But you mentioned the Big 8 back then. My teammates, Kevin Darkus, world silver medalist. My brother Joe was a teammate of mine my freshman year. Of course, he's a 4-time All-American national champion. I was a national champion. Guys like Randy Conrad and from the Chicago area, one of my best friends today, teammate friends and all that, and Dave Brown. Just had some.
Kevin Darkus was a guy who John Smith never got the better of. Darkus put it on John Smith 3 times that freshman year. Like, not even close.
But John was a young. He was never. I mean, Kevin told me, wrestling John, he goes, he's getting pretty tough. I go, you're beating him by whatever it was, and pretty decent scores. He goes, nah, he's getting. Kevin saw all that coming. Kevin was no dummy, right?
Yeah.
But at our upper weights, we had guys like Mike Mann's, a 4-time All-American and a couple-time runner-up, and Pete Bush. And by the way, Pete Bush is got a pretty big health scare going on right now. My thoughts and prayers are with him and his family.
I didn't know that.
And, yeah. So it's had an accident and had a little bit of a neck damages. So he's trying to get the feeling back in his arms and legs. So if people know about that, throw him in your thoughts and prayers. National champion, great guy, great coach. So
Assumption
anyway,
High School. Yeah.
yeah, right, yeah,
Yeah.
Pete's one of the best guys there is. And so lost my train of thought there, but
No,
he
we
had
were
great
just talking
teammates.
Big
Yeah,
Eight and
yeah, and there's one year in 1981 where Oklahoma had, with the dropping of Colorado, they brought in Derek Glenn. They had 10 returning All-Americans, and that wasn't enough to beat the Gable team.
yeah, man.
Yeah.
So this is like things are heating up, and so you become the head coach. Is 85-86 your first season as a head coach or your second?
85-86 is my first season. So really what we've tried to do here, Ryan, is we went back and looked at this second duel between Iowa and Iowa State. And I'm going to tell you the genesis of how this happened. So I've got a longtime friend of mine, John Myers, who is, he's been on the set of Always Sunny in Philadelphia for 14 years. He's done some really major projects in Hollywood. Grew up in Eagle Grove, Iowa. Grew up watching public television, like a lot of even guys in Illinois like you guys.
Oh, yeah.
See all those meets and all that. So he grew up watching that. He was on the 86-87 team at Nebraska. And so after that, he went out and did how he broke in is he did hair band music videos for hair bands. Mm-hmm. So for MTV. And then what he's basically, his job has been a special effects supervisor. For the last 25 years, we became really good friends. My roommate, Kelly Ward, who was a national champion at Iowa State, got a little bit older than me, kind of one of my mentors. He ended up be coaching John at Nebraska. So we got together at different wrestling functions or whatever, became really good friends. And then he was always the guy that I would bounce off all my media stuff with wrestling. And anyway, we always talk about doing something creative together. And he calls me up, and I'm on the roof of my house, and I'm building a new house in Johnston, and there's general contract and stuff. I'm on the roof of this house, and he calls me up, and it's right when COVID hit Hollywood, because Tom Hanks got COVID, and so they shut it all down. And so he's a guy that needs about 4 hours of sleep, and so he was down some rabbit hole the night before. Iowa State Archives website pulls up this dual meet. And he said, well, what do you remember about this dual meet? He said, this is one of the most dramatic meets I've ever seen. And, for me, it was, we won the meet, and it was a great thing, but the rest of the story was not quite that great of a story for us. I mean, we were ranked 2 in the country. We started the year that year thinking we were going to go over to Iowa City, where the Nationals were in March, and we were going to win. We were going to snap Iowa Street. And when you have a rival, right, who's been getting the best of you, for that long, and you've been close at times and all that, which I've seen over my college career as an athlete and certainly as a coach. And you want to be the one that does that, right? That has to happen. You have to do it, right? Nobody else can do it for you. You've got to. Our mindset, and that year was so wonderful because those guys did everything that we ever asked them to do. I mean, I love that team because as a young coach, a lot of things can go wrong. Okay. But those guys were they did everything we asked them to do. For the most part, we ended up, having a lot of momentum. We only lost one meet coming into this meet, and we have Iowa. They've won their 8 in a row already. If they haven't, as we say in the docuseries, they've assumed dominance, which they did.
Who would you bring in as assistants?
I brought in Eddie Bannock, right, from Iowa, all right, and Kevin Darkus and my brother Joe and Jeff were still in the program. Nice. Jeff was a freshman, and Joe was a returning NCAA champion. So we ended up, just if you spend any time around Eddie Bannock, he's a guy that high belief, and this pen, all right, you can win nationals, right? I'm going to teach it's just what I love about Eddie is that just that delusional confidence in guys that he puts his hands on, right? And it was just very powerful, right? And we had Ed in the program because that's the way he wrestled. I mean, Eddie envisioned beating Russians when he was in high school, right? So long and the short of it is that's why I brought him into the program. It was a great transition for him. But our guys, we were telling them all along, you put the training in and all that stuff. And we were pretty good before Ed got there. We had a lot of guys that were capable of performing at that level, I believed anyway. And so anyway, we ended up we ended up having this dual meet. So it was a bad memory from where we went down. But I looked at it and I started counting up all the national champions. There were 12 guys that won 16 NCAA titles. There were 29 NCAA finalist appearances that we're just pulling this off the top. There were 44 All-Americans. Knew these guys well enough on both sides, obviously, to know what their credentials were. There were 11 guys from the state of Iowa that won 24 Iowa State titles.
Between both teams, you're saying these are the stats?
Between both teams.
Wow.
And so I sat there and I go, and I knew how much work it might be. And I tried to bluff John and said, well, if we do this, we've got to talk to everybody. Everybody that'll talk to us. And he called my bluff. He goes, okay, we'll do it. All right. And that was it. All right. And then we went out and collected 4,000 minutes worth of interviews. We went to 9 states, interviewed all these guys. We had a couple guys interviewed together. Like Dan Gable and I did it together. And then we also had Joe and Kevin Dresser do it together. They wrestled. As the year Kevin won his national title and Joe won it the year before, the juxtaposition of the Iowa State guy and now the new the Iowa State coach, right? So
yeah, so folks, he was on the Iowa lineup that year.
Yeah, he's in the Iowa lineup and one of their national champions that year. And then we had Bill Tate and Royce Alger. Now, Bill Tate, a lot of people may not be aware of him, but probably one of the best wrestlers I've coached that never became an All-American. He had probably the best month of wrestling I've ever coached. Beat Rob Cole 8-0, beat Johnny Johnson 13-3, pinned him in the Big 12s, and then beats Royce Alger 10-2.
Jeez, that's crazy, man.
That's crazy. Well, you watch this match, all right, episode 3. Okay, first of all, Royce and Bill sit down together, all right, and it's comedic gold, right? I tell people, the world needs a lot more Bill and Royce, right?
Wow. So is KJ not in this lineup, or is he the next year?
No, he when he came in, that was his redshirt year.
That was his redshirt year. Okay.
Yeah, and he was So Mike Van Arsdale's in it from Waterloo. So right, so and Mike and Van and Royce were, they had a lot of rivalry matches over their years. So it was just we talked to as many guys. We got 9 of the guys that lost in this thing talked to us, including Matt Eglin, right? And Matt was just fantastic. He's in every episode, and so we're really so we've taken a piece of dusty old Iowa public television footage and turned it into something that I think people that not only wrestling people, not only Iowans, but wrestling people in general. We've had several people screen it from outside the state, and I think what we've kind of created is that time capsule. Mm-hmm. You got to remember that at this point, 15 of the last 17 national champions had been won by these 2 schools, and even though we call it the duel, all right, but really it's like a tri meet is 3 teams, quad is 4 teams, duel is 2, right? It's not a sword fight or point a gun to somebody's head, right? So it's the duel. It's a double entendre of both programs, and you see, so there's success in cultures, and it's just the juxtaposition of the 2, but also the commonality too between the 2 schools, and then the guys talking about each other 35 years later, going and collecting these 4,000 minutes worth of interviews was just one of the highlights of anything I've ever done in wrestling.
Wow.
Reconnecting with these guys that I've coached, but also guys I had relationships with, like, Brad Penrith, and getting Matt Eglin to visit with us, and Jim Heffernan, Dwayne Goldman, of course, Royce, guys like that you could have. We get Marty Kistler to visit with us in California. Mark Sindlinger at Iowa, the heavyweight at that time. was just coming off a Rose Bowl performance, about 6 weeks worth of training, if that. But his career at Iowa, he was the 2-time Big Ten Lineman of the Year, and he was also a 2-time All-American, and 3-time state champion at Charles City, coached by Jim Miller, by the way, who's obviously the legendary worker coach, right? National champion, multi-time national champion coach. So long and the short of it is, I think this is going to have a lot to offer to people that have ever been part of a rivalry, had a rival. And I don't know about you, Ryan, but you've been in the sport. Now you've been away from it long enough, but there's those key people that you had in your life that kind of drove you. And for a lot of us that were at this time frame, it was each other on the Iowa in the Iowa program. And it ended up being, with 86 and 87. And I think the other thing too is that this morphs into a story where we go down after the last hand is raised. We go down I call them 11 gravel roads, where we tell story arcs of things that happened after the last match, from the van ride home that everybody talks about, our team going like this, the Gable magic of pulling that team back up. They had 8 guys that showed up at national title. They created the spread, the largest spread between first and second at 72 points. That's huge. And then the 9 in a row, which I think is going to be something that Gable's going to be known for quite some time.
I'm glad you said that, because to me, it's like the duel itself, unbelievable. But now looking back 35 years later, what happened? So 86 duel 1, Iowa wins. 86 duel 2, you guys win. But then going to nationals, as he said, Gable rolls in with 8 guys and still wins it by the widest margin ever. Crazy. At Iowa City.
Yeah, at Iowa City. And if you take a look at the guys who finished 4th and 5th, I think it was Rico and Royce, and they're national champions the next year.
And then in 87, duel number 1, you guys win handedly. Duel number 2, you almost win handily, and there's a crazy situation at that duel meet too, correct?
Yeah.
87 duel 2?
Yeah, so we it just created it was a great time, I think, for the rivalry. And when you see Dan and those crazy pictures of him and Carver and all that stuff, he's wrestling my teams, all right? So it's on, So the thing about this is that I was really blessed when I got out of coaching to come back and do this media thing, because one of the first gigs I did were for public television, and Gable and I we'd spend 20, 30 minutes and talking about, what's going on and all that stuff. And it was really cool for me, because it was affirming of what I was doing at the time. You always wonder, where am I, so we kind of let our guards down a little bit more. And, he had just got out of coaching, and so we spent a lot of time together. And by this time, Cale Sanderson's coming through as a collegiate wrestler and all that. So it's, I remember spending about 45 minutes in the locker room with him before on Cale's last meet. And he sent me through, I go, Coach, I'm looking at this Sanderson, and I just don't see him getting beat. All right. I said, I just don't see it happening. Right. But they had to be thinking the same thing, everybody, about you back in 70. What happened? And he took me on a journey of talking about, the preparation for the Mike Grant match, where he go down to Oklahoma, wrestling the national champion up above. And then he took me through all the kind of the little things that he, in his recollection, happened moving up to that, including the right before he was about ready to go out there, and the 40 times he had to do was something very simple, like, hi, I'm Dan Gable. Come watch me win my, 3rd national title and go undefeated. And here on ABC's Wild World of Sports, and it took like 45 takes, and he missed all of his warm-up time. And
can you imagine that?
Well, it's like, you look at it today. So, Dan that day, or I think it was a Sunday afternoon, he was seeing a lot of himself and Cale. And Cale, and I'm right next to him, right? And they wore the robes that day, which they rarely horrible. Gale came out in a robe, and it was very powerful. And Dan was just he was shaken to the core because he was reliving the whole.
Wow.
The
I'm getting
so
chills right now. Wow.
yeah. I was like, like I said, that was one day that I was really blessed because I got to hear from the man himself about just retaking the whole. So we've had that a respectful relationship, and I Dan doesn't have many rivals, right?
Right.
Yeah, I was like, so, but I was in a great situation to grow up, and wasn't a kid in the state of Iowa that hadn't been influenced by Dan Gable from the early '70s on, or late '60s on,
Yeah.
and if you talk about the people who are around him today, he's still, um, there's nobody like him.
No,
I don't care. Others could have other, there might be other. There's just nobody like him, right? So we have Dan in this like nobody's seen him before.
I can't wait. And we're going to promote the heck out of it. And it's such a cool project you did. And it's right. People are getting so excited for wrestling right now. It's coming out right before the season. Let me ask you this though, as we wind down here, because to me, what happens at the 87 NCAAs is pure magic. Iowa State wins it for the first time. And you can tell me how many years. They break Iowa's streak. Gable's from Iowa State. Oh, yeah, it's 17 years because they won 77. And then tell me about the moment Bill Kelly slaps that split on Penrith, gets the win. Then how would you contrast that to the feelings you felt after 86?
Oh, well, 86, okay, there are two things that I recall mostly about that. Number one was something what I felt personally as far as being head coach. And sometimes it's okay to admit, you don't want fear to capture you or paralyze you or whatever, but it's the first time where I kind of felt like, it's really important. It's like, the Dodgers and the Braves and all those teams that got knocked off, they had the great records and all that stuff. And 2 years removed from Tommy Chesbro getting fired for finishing second in the place. So we're a program that has just as much pride as Oklahoma State. At the time, we're a very proud program as well. And I was there to win that national title. All right, it's one of those times where I felt like, we had two number 2 seeds not place, Billy Kelly being one of them.
Wow.
And that's not good coaching. Okay, and that's not getting guys ready to. So there's a lot of things that I had to look at myself and what we were doing, and when you put a new staff together, everybody wants to, it's almost like you got to fill them up, right? But you can't be putting so much in the glass that if you put a Dixie cup up to a fire hose, right? You wouldn't be able to control whether it got full or not, right? There might be so much going in that a lot of it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of the way I felt that we were kind of approaching this from a technique standpoint and coaching standpoint and all that, where we just really had to kind of get back to just like, what do you need to do what can we do to help you win tight matches? All right. And I don't think we did that as well. I don't think our preparation was as good, and we kind of let the pedal off, the foot off the pedal a little bit that year. It's a tremendous learning experience, but at the expense of a lot of guys that weren't going to have an opportunity to go ahead and do it again.
Did you win the Big Eights in 86?
We didn't win the Big Eights in '86. Oklahoma beat us. They had a great team. That's the team with Dan Shade, who beat Dwayne Goldman, and that like I said, the competition was fantastic. So we were 19-1 duels, finished second. So we're not going in with a lot of momentum, and we end up going the other direction. I think we had some guys that wrestled great terms. Mike Van Arsdale wrestled great term. John Horopoulos, we moved up from 190 to heavyweight. He gets second in the country as a 225-pound heavyweight, takes out the number 1 seed Tom Erickson.
Wow.
And Oklahoma State. So I think we had some. It wasn't like we were terrible, but we finished fourth. But building that scenario where we're going over there in a 2-hour drive, and we're gonna take them out. We weren't quite. Maybe we weren't there yet, but you know what? I believe in kind of creating that delusional confidence.
Yeah.
And if you don't get it when you are ready, you will get it. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
Tell
me about what you were feeling then going into 87, knowing that the pressure had to be building a little bit for you.
Not really, right? Because here's why: is because after the 86 season, Saturday night at the Canterbury Inn in Iowa City, we got everybody who was eligible back into the hotel room, right? And we had a meeting with 15, 18 guys in the hotel room. And I was just, I just telling them, but I think it's okay at that point in time to let people know that we screwed up. I feel bad. I want you to feel this the way I think we all feel that it's okay to feel this, but we're going to be, I didn't try to fire anybody up. I just tried to admit that this is a low point for us. And there were guys crying, and, I probably had tears in my eyes and all that stuff. And it was just, I just knew at that point in time, everybody in that room really cared deeply. Mm-hmm. And when you know that, you can deal with everything else that goes on. And then you can have that unconditional confidence of we're going to be there at the right time next year. And I didn't have to say a whole heck of a lot. So no, I wasn't really responding. I didn't really feel the pressure. I knew we were going to be better than fourth. Right.
Yeah.
Now think about this for a second, Ryan. How many times have you ever heard about a team that was ranked fourth in the country, right, going into nationals and winning it by 25 points?
Never. Yeah. I can't think of one.
No, it never happened. Okay.
That was the scene in 87?
That was the scene in 87. But it doesn't happen unless there's the heartbreak of 86. It does not happen unless we're setting those high goals, right, to go ahead and perform at that moment. It doesn't happen if we're not reminding ourselves. It doesn't happen if you don't have great teammates that are picking themselves up and picking their teammates up. And I had a lot of that going on. I had a lot of leadership at that point in time. We had a lot of seniors that had to kind of underperform, but we also had, we had young guys coming up like Krieger and Eric Volker, my brother Jeff, right, all that were significant parts of that. But we had guys like Stuart Carter. I know you probably don't know much about him, but Stuart didn't wrestle in 86, didn't make the team. He wrestled behind Tim Krieger, my brother Joe. So he wrestled behind 2 national champions. He gets into the lineup right before the second semester, and he wins 17 matches in a row the back half of the year, and wins a national title.
No,
never been on. Never. He was the varsity guy his freshman year, but after that he wrestled behind Joe and Krieger, and but he's one of the best success stories that we've ever had, and
that's like a Mark Branch story almost.
It's not quite the March Branch story because he went in there
17 streak. Yeah.
So, but I love Mark Branch, right?
But I mean, that's just that's just incredible. That's all development. That's mindset. That's the culture you guys had him going in, and you had him revved up. And Ryan,
not to interrupt you, but
please.
Too much. But it's not that we had them revved up, all right? They just exuded confidence. And I remember, we hadn't won it yet. We're getting to the point where we can clinch. And on Friday night, my guys are telling, hey, we got 5 guys in the finals, and we've never every gym that we've ever been in, we've never lost more than we've always had 5 wins. They were coming up with the little factoids to give themselves confidence.
Wow.
I go, yeah, you're right. Okay, so it's like, he's just on a great ride. But again, this is about 86.
Yep.
This is me. It's not what you think it is because I'm involved with it from the standpoint we're telling the stories as the guys. We have a little bit of narration in the first episode, a little bit, okay, but most of it is told by the guys who were involved. Our announcer Chuck Patton, who did a great coaching career at UNI. The college division national champion coach a couple times, and a well-known figure in the state of Iowa. we interview him out in Seattle. We interview all the guys. And the way this really kind of came about for us is that once we had these 4,000 minutes of interviews, we decided then to tell what the story was going to be. And it was amazing how reverent they were towards each other and respectful, and as you'd expect, and with a great rivalry.
Yeah.
With only talking with mature men in their 50s, and so that was the really cool thing about it. And there was no disrespect. It was just we showed this to Shane Sparks, and Shane had the great take. He said, "Jim," he says, "this is one of the most romantic things I've ever seen in my life." And I go, in the truest sense of the word, it really is.
Ain't the best.
It's like, in the truest sense of that word, it really is. And I think he's got a cameo appearance in this as well. But we once we decided what the ending storylines would be, and we drove towards that point, it morphs into being a story about Dan and the 9 in a row. And that's not what people think about when they say, "Well, the duel, you guys won the duel." I'm the executive producer. Well, executive producer basically just getting everybody together, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That requires a lot of trust, and we don't want to. And our whole objective on this thing was to make it fun and cool, and we think we've accomplished that. We can't wait for people to dig into it. We've shown it to probably about 60 people, and it's never been. One thing about it, Ryan, it's never been done before.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why it couldn't be done is because you don't have that footage from public television back in the day. That was when we got a hold of it. It was about ready to disintegrate, and we got it redone in LA and digitize it and all that stuff. And we ended up bringing that, so you get that footage along with it. But it just tells you, it's just a time capsule of the way it was back then. And like I said, I think it's told by the guys.
Right.
We can't really direct that in any particular direction, but it's about the two programs, about the cultures. It's about the two programs, and what it was like to wrestle back in the 80s.
Well, I can't wait for everyone to watch it, and so grateful you came on the podcast and told us a little bit about the story and gave us some of your background. Hit us real quick with the dates. You're doing some live showings in Iowa, and then it's going to be on all the streaming apps. November what?
Well, we're hoping for mid-November. We're in the QC quality control process there with a company called Bitmax, and then they put it on Amazon. So each one of these, Amazon, Google Play, YouTube TV, Apple Plus. So it's going to be on there. We're hoping to get that out in mid-November here at $2.99 an episode. I would tell you about that $2.99 episode. At some point in time, it'll be for $9.99 for the whole 6 at some later date. We tried to time this around the Iowa State duel coming up. Like I said before, I think it's going to be something that has an appeal beyond it. It's paid for. The dollars that we receive from that are going to go into the Duel Foundation. You can follow this on the Duel, just like my hat here, .org. And so we set up a foundation here that's going to go on. And a lot of these guys are still involved with helping kids wrestling and little kids clubs, and there's a lot of promotional things that people are doing. We'd like to be able to go ahead and help out that a little bit with our efforts. We've had some donors step up and add to our foundation. That's helping us with our screening efforts that you mentioned. We're doing 5 screenings. Next week, we're doing one in Waterloo at the museum, where we had the episode 3 with Bill and Royce that is filmed up there. We're showing the 3rd episode there, where Bill and Royce actually are in that one. The second one we're doing is in Waukee, Des Moines area, which is the movie theater called The Palms. We got a 220-seat movie theater, just about sold out. We're showing episode 1 there. Episode in Sioux City, we're having a night with Dan Gable, sponsored by the museum. And that's going to be episode 5, which was very Gable-centric. And the episode in Iowa City on the 15th of November, we're going to do one, and that's going to be obviously Gable-centric over in Iowa City with their crowd there. And then on the 17th, we're doing one at Jack Trice Stadium. Go back to Iowa City. Kenseth Hospitality Properties is sponsoring us with that. They're giving us a venue and going to be a nice place. Most of these places are not, they're going to be free of charge, and the sponsors are picking it up. Places like Fairway Meat and Grocery, we've got some pretty big sponsors here, Reynolds Kramer with that. So the last screening is going to be at the Souk Up End Zone in Jack Trice Stadium at the 17th of November. So nice. That's going to be a 400, 500 person blowout. So for that, we've already got 250 people. So, I mean, got another month, to do that. So these things have filled up pretty quick. So, but we've got Gable Beer being our sponsor. We just,
what do we got? What do we got?
This is
awesome.
Our dual poster, right? That we have. People to show up at these venues going to be able to get a chance to get some of that. But like I said, it's we've donated this, and we're going to donate the proceeds of that. So, but it's truly one of the coolest things I've ever been. You know how one of those things where I just have those feelings about that same feelings I had when maybe I'm coaching Stuart Carter and go,
oh yeah,
man, he's getting tough, man. He's looking good. He's doing well with the guys, and I think it wouldn't surprise me if he wins it. All of a sudden you watch him go out there and he wins. I got the same feeling about this thing.
It's exciting. Yeah. Like I said, I can't wait. Go to theduel.org for all your information, and we'll continue to push out announcements about it. And it's just such an honor to have you on here and to have you, contributing this back to wrestling. As you said, anytime you have a big project coming out, it's exciting. It's a little nerve wracking. You're like, yeah. It's just you're so close to it, and then when you finally let other people see it, it's such a big face. So I'm so grateful that you did. Go ahead.
You've had that experience as well. You've done a really good job here. Some of the, I loved the Smiths, the thing that you put out there, all the stuff, and the stuff with Chris Campbell and yeah. I mean, all the that's important. And let me say this is that we feel very strongly that public television footage should be out there for people who want to tell great stories. We've had a battle to go ahead, and that's why this is taken as long as it has to get out. Not because it wasn't done, but I will tell you this: technically, it's good. The guy who did the color edits for color has won 22 Emmys. Stephen P. Arkle. Wow. The guy who did the sound for this, Yessie and Music, Yessie and Sound, has done has done Super Bowl commercials all over. These are connections to John Myers's, and they took this with the same spirit that we did. We got the friends and family rate to nice. Bring this out, but this type of stuff has never been done, and 35 years later, but to be able to have the footage, to have these guys talk about it like it was yesterday, and to talk about it with the eye of maturity that it takes. And then our big thing is if this helps people, there's people that experience some pretty crushing defeats in this thing, and to hear them talk about it. Again, 9 of the guys that lost in this thing ended up coming out and speaking to us. But if this helps one more guy stay in officiating, if this helps one more guy become an assistant coach or stay with it, it helps a dozen young people stay with the sport, and recognize the value of being a part of a team and having lifelong friends and teammates like that, and thinking about your rivalry in the correct way, where it can be beneficial to you throughout your life. We think that we've accomplished our goal.
Love it. Great way to wind this down. Thank you so much for coming on, Jim. It's an honor, and I can't wait for the listeners here to watch the documentary.
All right. Yeah. Follow us at theduel.org. All right. We're on social media as well. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks again. We'll see you soon. Ryan.